Okay, so this is another instance where, as I was raising my hand, I was like, what am I doing? But I have never done one of these unprepared speeches before, and I keep thinking I should try it. Because worst case scenario, it goes badly, and then I just go sit down again. And I was thinking, what can I talk about that I know a lot about without preparing ahead of time? And it's my master's thesis. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges of field research and what can go wrong. So my master's thesis, I studied wintering waterfowl in the South San Francisco Bay. They have a whole set of salt ponds down there, and the waterfowl use them as wintering habitat, and they were getting ready to do some restoration of some of the salt ponds, and so it was going to kind of limit the birds' habitat, and they were going to introduce trail use. And so it was U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wanted to know, what's the impact of putting all these first off, reducing the amount of habitat that these ducks are going to have during the winter, and then sticking a bunch of trails around them. And no one really knew how they would respond to trail use in a new area, just novel trail use by people. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna study that. That's my thesis topic. And started working with my thesis advisor and trying to figure out, okay, how do you study that, and how do you begin? And so we went to the literature and looked at studies where that had already been looked at. And there was really only one that we could find, and it was on the East Coast. And I actually called up the researcher, and I said, okay, I want to do this. How did you design your study? And so she's like, oh, okay. So I went out there. I'd go out in the dark before the sun came up, and I'd go out to this one spot along the trail, and then I would set up my chair and I would wait, and then after the sun came up, the ducks would be out in the pond, and then I'd have a trail user go by and I'd, study what the ducks did. And I was like, okay, well, perfect, I can do that. So I got my research assistant, we went out there, just trying it out, had my chair, we went out there, we walked out to my study site, and we got there, we set up our chair, and probably we weren't even halfway out to our study site before all the ducks that had been in the pond that I was hoping to study just took off. And so we were like, okay, well, I guess we'll hang out for a little bit and see if they come back. So we hung out for a little bit, and they never came back. Luckily, I enjoyed spending time with my research assistant. She was a good friend of mine, so we just kind of hung out and talked for an hour, waiting for the ducks to come back, and they never came back. So I was like, well, that's not going to work. So we tried a different kind of scenario, but with like sometimes hunters use these chairs that are like blinds, and so you sit in it and it's a blind. So it's portable. So I was like, okay, I'll try this. I'll do this, and I'll do it a little further away. But same thing. Before I got very close to them at all, they all took off. So I was like, well, clearly someone does need to study this because they don't like people being around. So I ended up, I convinced my thesis advisor, I dragged her out into the field with me. And I was like, okay, see, this is my problem. And then I took her out to the study site I wanted to use. And she was like, oh, wow, this really is a problem. So she helped me, and we kind of worked out a way that I could, instead of doing so much studying what the ducks were doing during the trail use disturbance, a lot of it ended up being kind of a before and after. So I would use a scope, and I had a whole system of distance bands from the trail. I'll talk about it some more in maybe one of my other future talks. And I would see where the birds were in the pond, and then we'd go out and disturb them, and then I'd count them again to see where they were in relation to the trail. And it turned out great. I was able to do 2 years of data collection. Then we kept using the same methodology actually in future studies, and we have a paper that's been accepted for publication in Waterbirds, so that's happening. And I guess the moral of the story is stick with it. You'll figure it out. Field research can be very, very frustrating, but there's a way to do it if you just work hard at it. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing the nice story, and you always make us laugh. I really like that. And when I was listening, I got one of my experience. I don't know that will work for you or not. I had 2 kids with me, one my niece and my son. We went to feed the duck in a pond. We had lots of bread in our hand. All of a sudden, we saw